All right, when I first moved into this space, I didn't spend a lot of time organizing my tools. I just needed to hit the ground running so I could make some money to pay the mortgage. So when I got a new tool, I just built a little thing out of some scrap wood and threw a little French cleat on it, threw my tool on there, and hung it up on the wall. And that worked for a little while, but not everything is the same size, so it's not really the best use of space. So I'm going to solve that by building some shop cabinets with some custom tool organizers and adjustable shelves to fit everything that I need in a nice, clean, compact, organized manner. All right, so as you know, plywood is ridiculously expensive, and I don't like hefting around those big, heavy 3/4 inch thick sheets of plywood. So I am going to build the majority of these cabinets out of solid alder. So I'm just going to get it bucked up here to rough lengths so I can get it milled up and glued together into panels. All right, so if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you know I'm a big fan of stops to help increase accuracy and speed, and this project is no different. Right now I have a stop set up at the miter saw, and I am just using that to very quickly cut these pieces to rough length. All right, so this is just your standard woodworking operations of getting everything ripped to width, jointed at the joiner to get it nice and flat so I can get it plane to thickness, and jointed and edge glued together. All right, so I'm building 11 or 12 cabinets, so I have a lot of work to do. So I am using my floating tenon cutter here to throw some floating tenons along the edges, so that way when I glue them up, they won't slip apart or slide back and forth. It's just a real quick, accurate way to make a nice flat panel glue up. All right, when I built my table saw cabinet, I edge banded the entire case with walnut and trimmed the drawers with walnut as well, and I really like that look. Some people might think that's kind of extravagant for shop furniture, but the shop is where I spend most of my time. So I like how it looks, and I want to be around things that are awesome. So I'm going to do the same thing with these cabinets for the wall. I've already glued up the panels. I probably should have glued on the edge banding at the same time, but sometimes you just got to make things more hard for yourself, a little more difficult. So I'm going to start ripping down some material to edge band this. All right, so I have the blue tape down to just help with glue squeeze out to make it easy to keep the work area clean. I freshly jointed my edge. All right, and so instead of going through and having to clamp each one of these, I'm just gonna do a little bit of a rub joint just to work the glue in, rub the wood back and forth there. And I'm just gonna use a headless brad. In a few strategic places, just to hold it like norm till the glue dries. All right, so I got all the panels glued up and ready to go. So we're gonna rip them to width now and cut them to length. And when I rip them to width, I am going to, of course, put my edge banding against the fence. All right, so I got this plywood from the home center. It's just some cheap plywood, if that's still a thing anymore. It's made in Brazil from the underlayment tree, so pretty cheap stuff. I'm just gonna use this for the backs. I'm gonna veneer over it with some shop sawn veneers from our alder. That way the backs match the rest of the cabinet. All right, so I either lost the footage or I just didn't hit record when I was resawing the wood for these veneer panels, but here is the shop sawn veneer all resawed up and sanded, ready to go. And I'm just going along here and putting some tape on here to tape it together so I can get it glued up and in the vacuum bag. All right, so it's time to cut all the parts to length. So I'm going to set up a stop to make sure that they all come out at the exact same length. So this guy is the top, middle, and bottom shelves of the case. And so by setting up my stop, it's going to help me make sure that the case comes out square. The sides are a little bit longer than what my miter gauge is able to handle. So I set up a stop back at the leading edge of the table, so that way it doesn't allow the workpiece to get pinched between the blade and the fence. All right, I got my dado blade set up here so I can cut the dados for the upper shelf, and then we will switch over to cutting the rabbets for the top and bottom, and that's how this case is going to be constructed. And then even though this would be pretty easy to push against the fence to cut that dado, I'm going to still use my miter gauge with the sacrificial board on the back here. And that's just to help prevent blowout when it comes through the other side. So I keep a nice crisp edge all the way around. While cutting the dados, I'm keeping track of which face I'm cutting the dado on because they need to be mirror images, so when they're assembled, they will face each other with the edge banding facing out. So on one side, I am cutting the dado with the edge banding towards the miter gauge, and then on the other side, I'm cutting the edge banding towards the camera. All right, so I did a quick reset so we could cut the rabbets for the tops and bottoms. Alright, so now I've adjusted the dado blade to the thickness of the back panels we glued up earlier and cutting a groove in the side panels to accept the back. And I have this dado blade set up so it will leave a 1/2 inch gap between the groove and the back edge, and that will allow me to glue in a French cleat to hang the cabinets from. Now I know at the beginning I said I was done with French cleats, but it's still a really good way to hang stuff. I'm just done with individual French cleat tool holders. All right, so I put it together to do a quick test fit here, and that is so I can measure for the inner panel. I want to take my measurements from the case whenever I can. So I'm just using my square to set the depth of the dado there, lock it down here, and that way I can just make a mark on this side, make a mark on this side. That's just a really quick and easy way to measure the size of the panel that I need. So this one's 21.5, and we'll do the same thing for the length here. So make a mark here, we'll make a mark on the other end, and then measure between the marks. Right, I'm going to joint one edge at the jointer, and that will give me a nice square edge to put against the table saw fence to rip it to its final width. All right, so I've got my back panels measured out and ready to cut them to length. These things are a little bit wieldy to push across the table saw, so we are going to use the track saw. I'm going to square up one end, and then I'll measure it to length and cut the other end. All right, so far so good. I did a test fit to make sure the back fit in the case nice, and I also wanted to make sure that my shelf fit tight in the dado here. And the main purpose of this shelf is to add some strength. Without this shelf, it would be really easy to rack this cabinet out of square. So this is going to help add a lot of strength and make sure it stays square. All right, so next we need to drill all the holes for the adjustable shelves. So there will be 2 strips of holes on each side of each cabinet, and I have roughly 12 cabinets that I'm building, so that's several hundred holes. So I don't want to use one of those stupid plastic jigs where you use the drill, because we're going to burn up batteries and burn up the drill on that many holes, and it's going to take forever. So I want to build a router jig. So that's what we're going to do next time. We're going to build a router jig to drill all these holes. I'll call it the ultimate router jig for floating shelves. And we're going to get all these holes drilled and get our shelves built, and then start working on our customized tool holders. So thanks for watching.